one of the striking features of economic development in colonial India in the 19th and 20th centuries was the role of business communities. The Parsis in western India and the Marwaris in eastern India are perhaps the best known of the communities. The most prominent of the southern groups is the Nattukottai Chettiars. The Nattukottai Chettiars, often called the Nagarathars, are a group of bankers and moneylenders from Chettinad who achieved fame and fortune outside their home boundaries. In his book The Discovery of India, Jawaharlal Nehru says, the Chettiars of Madras have also been leaders in business and banking especially since ancient times. Nattukottai Chettiars originally belonged to Kanchipuram in the Tondaimandalam region but migrated to Pumpuhar, which was a port town on the east coast of the then Chola Empire. At Pumpuhar, they flourished as merchants and traders. Pumpuhar was destroyed in a tsunami in the 4th or 5th century. After Pumpuhar was destroyed, the Chettiars migrated to the region wedged between the South Velar and Vagai rivers, that is, between the Chola and Pandya kingdoms. Epigraphic records relating to the names of deities in the 9 clan temples established the relationship between Chettiars and medieval merchant guilds. The names of these deities, which are references to trade guilds, include Jayamkonda Choliswarar, Desinathar, Ainutriswarar, and Pattinaswamigal. Chettiars were primarily employed as salt traders. Salt, in various forms, was produced in coastal regions and traded inland. A manuscript beginning in 1600 recounts the history of a Nattukottai Chettiar trader who came to Palani from Chettinad to investigate the prospects for expanding his salt business. Chettiars started moving their operations out of the Madras Presidency in the early part of the 19th century. While they had already expanded their operations to neighboring Sri Lanka by the 18th century, a small number of Chettiar firms began establishing branches in Kolkata in the early 1800s, in Malaya by 1808, and in Myanmar by 1826. Their decision to relocate overseas may be linked to specific measures that directly affected and diminished the indigenous bankers' traditional roles in the Madras Presidency. In 1778, the abolition of the system of revenue collection through indigenous agencies affected that side of their business. The second measure, in 1835, introduced the uniform rupee coinage. This action deprived indigenous bankers of the highly lucrative commission charges on the interchange of currencies. The difficult times do not seem to have affected the social cohesion of the Chettiars. When opportunities afforded by the British colonial expansion in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Malaya arose, the Chettiars were able to respond to them. A well-organized apprenticeship scheme, a system of incentives and bonuses, centralized control, and a well-developed bookkeeping system lay at the core of the agency system. This enabled the Chettiars to open branches overseas while maintaining their headquarters in India. The business operations overseas were regulated by caste panchayats and later by caste associations, which played a major role in the economic and social life of the Chettiars abroad. These associations fixed interest rates on term deposits and mediated disputes between Chettiar firms. The associations also collected a religious tax, which was levied on all Chettiar firms for purposes of charity. In Malaya, Chinese pioneers in the tin mining and rubber planting industries relied heavily on Chettiar financing. In Myanmar, the Chettiars initially extended credit to local moneylenders, and with the expansion of the rice-growing area, they became the chief source of credit for the Myanmar rice farmers. In Sri Lanka, the Chettiars were the chief source of credit for local Sri Lankan agriculturists. In the years after the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869, all three colonies were increasingly linked to the world market. Myanmar became the chief producer of rice, Sri Lanka emerged as an important producer of tea, and Malaya became the primary producer of rubber and tin. As the products of each of these countries became important commodities on the world market, the Chettiar community became very successful. The Nattukottai Chettiars also lavished money on temples and cultural organizations and financially supported virtually every public movement without discrimination. Washbrook estimates that the Chettiars spent about 2 crores between 1860 and 1914 on temple renovations alone in the Madras Presidency. Individual Chettiars donated huge sums of money toward charity and public works. Much of the Nattukottai Chettiar wealth was acquired in the 4 decades before 1930. In the 35-year period between 1896 and 1930, according to evidence before the Madras Banking Commission, the value of Chettiar assets and operations increased from 10 crores to 80 crores. By 1930, the Nattukottai Chettiars had built up financial and commercial assets amounting to 100 crores.